Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on the main track and welcome back to my Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad Sedalia subdivision layout. As you can see, we're sitting here in the Sedalia yard and I have my two SW1200 switchers by Walthers sitting here quietly, and there is kind of a reason for that. You may recall I did a review of these two switchers earlier this past summer when these locomotives came out. And this is the first time I'm going to have to do a revision of a review. Now, I'm not going to exactly call this a retraction of a review, but more, let's wait and see what happens with the situation before I come back with the final judgment on these. Now, looking back on that video, you may recall I gave a pretty glowing review of these new switchers by Walthers here. These things look fantastic. They sound really great. The details are very nice on these things, and I was really enjoying operating these switchers here in my layout. I have number 3, and I also have number 1. Now, after that review, a lot of you left some comments regarding your experience with these switchers. Some of the people who purchased those were saying the decoders were fried on them. They had some problems with overheating, a lot of the programming with the decoders, and were suggesting that perhaps Walthers had a bad batch of decoders with these switchers. Now, I considered myself pretty lucky because with the two I had, I was not having any problems with them. I thought I would run them for several hours worth of operation and see if any problems came up, and they never did. But something did come up a couple of days ago, and I've now unfortunately joined the club of people with switchers from Walthers here that have some problems. Now, I'd programmed number 1 and 3 to be in a consist together, and that was how I was operating them. And it'd been about a week or two since I'd fired them up. I'd been doing some other work on the layout, using some other locomotives to do my switching operations, and decided I wanted to run these things. I mean, I really like operating these. I love the way they sound. They're really a lot of fun. So it was time to fire the switchers back up. When I did that, things were running just perfectly as they had. But then I noticed a problem. Number 3 over here, which was the lead in the consist, was operating, but it was being bogged down. The wheels were turning. That's because number 1's wheels had stopped turning. And I wondered what was going on exactly with that. Well, about the same time I wondered that, my layout shorted out. And what happened next was all in a span of milliseconds. All the other locomotives in my layout shut down, and I began noticing smoke pouring from the underframe right here, which I pretty much immediately knew was not a good thing. So what I did was I immediately picked the locomotive off the rails. The body was pretty warm to the touch, and it continued smoking for a few seconds. So I kind of blew on it. The smoke eventually dissipated. Once I took the locomotive off the rails, thankfully, my DCC system, which had seemed to have shorted out, fired right back up. The layout is just fine and dandy, but the locomotive is shot. It's not working. Right now I have them on the rails here, but I have the power to layout off. Otherwise, if I had the layout on, number 1 would be sitting here shorting things out once again. So as you can imagine, I was pretty disappointed with number 1 dying out on me here. Thankfully, number 3 continued to work just fine as I run it back and forth. No problems with that. But considering the issues I had with number 1, I'm really kind of afraid to continue running number 3. I mean, I may never have any problems with that whatsoever, but just considering the little dying process the number 1 went through with that smoke, that's pretty concerning, especially with the layout shorting out. So I did not want to have a repeat of that. I've simply been leaving this one on the deadline as well. And to tell you what, I'm super surprised that the shell on number 1 didn't melt, considering how hot it was when I picked it off the rails and the amount of smoke that was coming out. Strangely enough, I can still smell a burnt odor coming from this, especially when I pick this up. Don't even have to get very close to it. You can definitely smell something coming off of that, like a burning electrical smell. And it's been several days since I had this happen. I'm sure it is a nasty mess on the inside of there. So I went on our MKT Modelers forum online and kind of reported what had happened. And of course, a lot of you guys chimed in saying, yeah, the same things have happened to you. It seems like some people have done the repairs themselves, taking the shell off and replacing that ESU decoder with perhaps a tsunami decoder, for instance. I was joking with one of the guys on there about how great these things look, how nice they sound, but the smoking feature, was a little bit much. Certainly something that none of us really need. Following through with the recommendations of some of the guys there on the forum, I was advised to contact Walthers to see what they could do. And I can tell you, so far I've been very impressed with Walthers customer service. I sent an email to them and they were very responsive, got back to me within the same day, and they apologized for the problems I was having with number one, told me to simply pack it back up, and they would even send me the label to ship this back to them, and they would replace that decoder. Now, as I mentioned, number three hasn't had any problems, but Walthers said, go ahead, pack up number three as well when I send number one in, and they will take a look at number three and do any adjustments they need, perhaps replace the decoder on that, just to make sure that I don't have the same problems with number three. Well, Walthers didn't tell me exactly how long it's going to take to get these repaired and back to me. I'm assuming it's going to be several weeks. But thankfully, I just finished up another locomotive here for my layout that will provide some extra power for switching while those switchers are in the shop. This here is another one of my Atlas GP40s that I have converted to one of those former Conrail units that the MKT had used. You may recall this one was one I did several months back where I showed you how I converted this up and patched it up for the Katy. This is all thanks to decals offered by Circus City. They offer these patch outs with the 237 and the MKT right there. Number 237 is one that I did to represent some of the units that had the patch out that had faded off, so you really saw the Conrail lettering. Originally, all of those Conrail units, once Katy got a hold of them, they patched them out like this one. So number 244 here represents one of the units that has that patch out still in place. Once again, I use the Circus City decals for the patch outs. They also come with the number boards. Those are kind of nice right there to be able to easily change those out. For the patch outs themselves, I went with Fusion's decals. These are, I believe, dark gray patch outs that you can use for freight cars. And so what I did was I took some of those and kind of put a couple of them together. They were a little short, weren't exactly long or tall enough to cover that Conrail lettering that I had taken off, but I was able to do some tweaks with a couple of different ones, combining those. Now, I was also able to add beacons for the tops of both locomotives right here. I had some additional ones left over when I did some change outs from my Athearn GP39-2s. Now, as I mentioned in my previous episodes with these Atlas GP40s, they're not the world's best representations. The tooling on these things is pretty old. They've been around for quite a while. A lot of guys have complained about the height of the cabs, saying that the cabs don't look quite right. A lot of people doing kit bashing jobs, putting new Canon cabs on those. With mine, I'm not going to quite go all out with that. That is because Class 1 Model Works several months back announced they are coming out with some brand new GP40s, including sun painted for Conrail. So what I'm going to be doing is waiting for Class 1 to come out with their locomotives, and if their freight car offerings give us any idea of what things are going to be looking like, they're going to be fantastic. So I'm really excited to see what those look like. Another thing that makes these an okay stand-in, I think, for now with the height of the cab is the coloring being broken up with the blue and the green decals. Your eyes don't notice the height of the cab quite as much, I don't think. At least my eyes are not catching that, so kind of an optical illusion, I think, helps break that up just a little bit. But once again, I know it's not perfect, but I do have TCS LokSound decoders in these, so they sound fantastic. And I've done some weathering on these, and I think they're going to be a fine stand-in. I asked some of the Class 1 guys at a train show recently when they thought those Jeep 40s will be out, and they said it's going to be about a year. So these things are going to be getting plenty of a workout here on the layout until that day comes. Well, thanks everyone, as always, for joining us here on the Sedalia subdivision. I'll be sure to keep you posted on those switchers, and we'll see you next time right here on the main track.